Hello, welcome back to my channel. So, we're done with February, and it's time to do a wrap-up video. And because it was Battle of the Girl Bands this February, I finished a lot of books. So, this one is going to be a long list of books with some commentary. Otherwise, we're going to be here forever. Yeah, I'll try and keep it from being too boring. So we'll see how this goes. Without any further ado, let's start with the first books that I finished in February. You'll notice I am filming from a different location. This is my room, which is really in progress right now. I need to finish putting some bookshelves together before everything can be put away. So, here we go. This feels like my old place. Sitting on the floor, stacks of books. This is great. So, first book that I finished in February 2024 is Lord Jim by Joseph Conrad. This is not my first Joseph Conrad. I finished 3 or 4 novels of his before this, and some short stories, and so not a new author for me, and not one I expected to like, and I didn't really like this one all that much. I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. My favorite is still Nostromo, and I don't think I need to reread this, but it is on Project Gutenberg if I needed to look it up in the e-text for future conversations where it comes up. So far, I don't think I've ever had it come up in conversation, though. It's not one of those that people talk about a lot. After that one, I finished some audiobooks. You might remember the first part of February, I was groaning about that I barely finished any print books at all. Yeah, so I finished 3 audiobooks in a row. Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, which I didn't make a penalty row for in my genre blanket. I made a new rule for February that I have to do a penalty row for any book that's not a book I had in print, because the whole point of the Read What You Own variation that I was doing all this year, that I'm still doing all this year, is to read more of the books on my actual shelves so they can go away. If I'm reading audiobooks, as wonderful as they are, if I don't have them on my shelves, it's still not helping. So, I'm not going to ban myself from doing audiobooks. I'm just adding a penalty row if it's an audiobook. However, the Alcatraz series, I'm giving a pass on, because I own book 4. And rather than acquiring books 1 through 3 to be able to read book 4, I'm just listening to those or reading those as e-text or e-audiobook. And so far it's been e-audiobooks because that's what our library has, and they're easy and they're kind of fun. The audiobooks are really well done. Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians by Brandon Sanderson. Middle grade, kind of older middle grade probably. Cute and not overly nerdy while still being nerdy enough. And fun for an adult. I did enjoy them. So I finished the first 2. The first book in that series was the second book of February. Alright, third book of February was A History of the Island by Eugene Vodoloshkin. And this is the second book I've read by him. The first one was really dry. Not bad, but dry. This second one is not bad, but dry. It's one that there were elements I really liked. There's a prince and princess that are kind of mysterious and live forever. And there's elements of kind of Russian mythology that work in. And it's kind of an allegory. I think it's an allegory about the history of the Crimean Peninsula. That seems to be kind of what's going on in both books that I read, was talking about the Crimean Peninsula. But it's an island instead of a peninsula, so obviously it's not the same thing. I think that was the point. But I couldn't be sure. If I was studying it in a class, I think I could figure it out. It's not that esoteric or badly done or anything. But reading it for pleasure, it's a bit dry. If you like dry books, you might really like that author. That's Eugene Vodolazkin. Oh, yeah. Alright, so, powering through these. Getting this done, because otherwise I'm never going to finish. Deep as the Sky, Red as the Sea by Rita Chang Epic. This is a book about the Chinese pirate queen. Real lady from the 1800s. She took over the captaincy of a pirate fleet and became really powerful for a while. But of course, the West was trying really hard to dominate trade in the ports in China and could not allow a pirate to get in the way. So, her days were numbered. This was a really good historical fiction about her. I enjoyed it. The cover is also pretty. I kind of might have picked it for the cover rather than reading anything about it. I liked the title and the cover. And it turned out to be a really good book. So that worked. The next book was actually one I had in print, and I read it in print, and it's nonfiction. So I felt like it made up a little bit for not following my intentional rules for the year so far. So I read Confident Women. This is a book I got as a Goodreads giveaway. It's by Tori Telfer. I got it a while ago, so I'm finally catching up on some of those that I just didn't get to. And so this one turned out to be good. It's about confidence trickster women. Most of them fairly successful. Some of them are more believably confidence tricksters. Some of them are just clever in ways that society might not appreciate. But a good book. I would recommend it. Then we have In the Dark by Mai Jia. So here's that one. This is a book about the Chinese intelligence service, or the intelligence agencies. Agencies plural, I would say, because there's several agencies that are sort of vying for dominance in this one. They're in a secret valley that isn't supposed to exist on maps, and kind of fun. It's not a thriller. I've heard people suggest it might be a thriller. It's not. It's literary fiction. The pacing is all wrong for a thriller. But it is dealing with spies. And that's kind of fun. But it's a lot more nerdy than most thrillers I've come across, too. Yeah. Whew. Man. It is almost 3 o'clock. So I've been doing mornings. I shouldn't do mornings. Anyway, next book, An Astronomer in Love by Antoine Lorrain. Antoine Lorrain. This is a book from the Dublin Literary Award long list for 2024, as was A History of the Island. Those two are my first to check off for the long list for 2024. I liked An Astronomer in Love a lot better. Nerdy again, which is good. It's following an astronomer in the past who is trying to image and measure the transit of Venus crossing in front of the sun. So he's going to horrendous lengths to try and get this image. He misses the first one, and then a couple years later he gets a chance to do it again. I think it's years. It should be years. Anyway, so he gets a second chance in his lifetime to catch this transit of Venus. But he has to go out on a ship to do it and go out in the middle of the ocean to be able to be in the right spot to be able to capture this image. So fast forward into the future to our present, and his telescope lands in the hands of a modern guy and becomes part of his love story that also centers around the transit of Venus. So it was a nice little parallel stories sort of structure. Nerdy. It has a romance. It was pretty nice. Then we have Life Class by Pat Barker. And I did this one as both the print and the audiobook. Not as an immersion read. I can't do the two at the same time. But when I wasn't at my computer or when my internet was not cooperating, I did the print book. So about 50-50. This one reminded me very much of Evelyn Waugh, Brideshead Revisited, or Waugh's trilogy, which it's like Sword of Honor trilogy or something like that. Waugh tends to talk about people that are living during a transition between society pre-World Wars and society post-World Wars. Parade's End is kind of dealing with that. And I'll remember it as soon as I'm not trying to think of it. Anyway, it's that kind of story. And this one is World War II rather than World War I, but we're still following a family and specific individuals in that family through the changing times as World War II is going on. It's also looking at the value of art during wartime. Is art still important, or is it just something we do that's frivolous during peacetime? And if it is important, how important is it, and where does it fit in, basically? There's also a lot of gender stuff. There's a lot to unpack in this book, and it's the first in a series. I haven't looked recently at what the other titles are for the series, but I probably have one or two. And if I don't, I'm sure one of my sisters has the other ones. So I will finish those. And I do recommend Pat Barker. So far I've liked all of hers that I've read. So after that one, I read a book that was mentioned in Tori Telfer's Confident Women, written by Harriet Wilson, who's one of the confidence tricksters in Telfer's book, or at least she describes her as a confidence trickster. I'm not so convinced about this one being in that category, but she was an interesting character, and this novel is, according to Telfer, the first self-published novel by an African-American woman. I'm not so sure how that plays out, because the introduction in Project Gutenberg and in Wikipedia didn't say that it was the first self-published novel by an African-American author. The self-published part is the part that not everybody seems to agree on. So I don't know if Telfer was just more complete in her research. I don't know that part. But it was really interesting. Its title is Our Nig, or Sketches from the Life of a Free Black. Yeah, it's an interesting book. I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't super compelling as a novel, but it was a really different perspective, because you don't usually get Black women's perspectives from the 1850s. This book was published in 1859 by Harriet Wilson. So that one's definitely worth looking up if you're interested in Black history, or women's history, or BIPOC authors and the history of BIPOC authors. Certainly an interesting book. And it wasn't about a novel. It just wasn't a 5-star for me. Next we have Horror Store, a total shift in topic, by Grady Hendrix. Got some zombie action going on there, and grossness, and yeah. Definitely horror. It started out where I wasn't sure where the horror comes in, but it got to be horror pretty quickly. I don't normally read the horror genre, but I really enjoyed this one. I listened to it as an audiobook. I will probably look for this one in print, because it sounds really cute. It's odd to be saying that a horror book is cute, but it was. It's not IKEA. It's not IKEA the way 4X in Discworld is not Australia. But just as 4X is oddly Australian, the store in Horror Store is oddly like IKEA. Only I don't think IKEA has zombies in its basement. As far as I know, there's no zombies in IKEA's basement. So that one was fun. I definitely look forward to seeing it in print and see if it's as cool as I think it is. The audiobook was fun. Definitely worth doing. And if all you can get is the audiobook, go for it, because it's definitely a fun experience. The way they read the descriptions in the beginnings of the chapters, it's like in the IKEA product descriptions, where they tell you how this is going to change your life. It's so wonderful. And yeah, they do that, but not always with objects that would be in a typical store. So yeah, that was fun. And then I went back to print. So I actually did this one partially in audio, but my internet was being really a pain, so I probably did about a third in audio and then the rest in print. For The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. Finally read it. It was good. It wasn't the kind of good where I remember everything about it just off the top of my head, so it is a 4-star, not a 5. Obviously, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, I remember Horror Store. I remember liking The Girl on the Train, and I remember bits and pieces, but not nearly as clearly. It didn't stick quite as well. Next book was an audiobook, The Complaints by Ian Rankin. I was looking for book 1 of his, I think it's something Rebus series. His much bigger series that I have other books from, and I wanted to start with book 1, which I don't have. And of course, I couldn't find that one in audiobook. So I went with The Complaints, which is also a book 1, but it's book 1 in a series that only has 2 books so far. I'm hoping there will be more because I did enjoy this one a lot. And I still have to find book 1 in the other series so that I can start reading the ones I've got. After that, I went back to Alcatraz by Brandon Sanderson. Alcatraz versus the Scrivener's Bones. Not as strong as book 1. Still cute, just not as good. And we have My Murder by Katie Williams. This one was an audiobook that I picked up on a whim because I'd already used all of my Hoopla checkouts, but I still had my Flex checkouts, which are separate. It's kind of a new thing that I'm still getting used to. And even after you've used up all of your slots, you still have the Flex. You still can use up to 10 at a time, but those are the ones that are only available 1 or 2 slots at all, and you have to wait till they're opened up and they're modern, recent books that everybody really wants. So that one came available and sounded interesting, and I got it. I gave it 4 stars. It is a bit sci-fi-ish. There's cloning, and the main character is investigating her own murder. She was murdered and then brought back to life and is now investigating her murder before she was revived. And she's part of a support group with other victims that are supposed to be all the same victims, or the victims from the same serial killer. So they have a bonding experience. They're, women that were all targeted by the same dude. So definitely an interesting premise. There's just something about it that didn't really work quite as well as I wanted it to, but it was fun. And then The Librarian of Crooked Lane. I've been staring at this cover for so long because it's just cool. I gave it 4 stars. It didn't live up to my hopes for it, but it was good enough that I got book 2 as soon as I had slots available again on, I think, Hoopla. I'll have to look and see what I checked it out through. Then I did Babel by R.F. Kuang, and I really enjoyed Babel. I'm such a nerd, and it definitely tapped into my specific nerdiness. I've studied, formally or informally, 10 languages. I think. Might be 11 by now. So, even though I don't know a lot of words in all the languages, I know enough to be able to kind of sound out words. I know a few words here and there. Enough that when languages pop up in a book like Babel, where it's about language to some extent, I can kind of nerd out on it, which is what I did. So I did this one as audio. I had the option after I was partway through to do print as well, because it turned out my sister has a copy. So I could have gone back to print for part of it, but I didn't really want to break the flow of the audiobook at that point. The audiobook is really good. And if you have a background like mine where nerdiness and languages are cool, audio will be fine. If you have not done much language study, or if it's really hard for you to study languages, or if you don't have a background in Chinese history and culture, or if you're not really much of a nerd, then immersion reading might be your way to go for Babel. Because I think it might be a bit too nerdy to just read or just listen to if you don't have that background. And I think that's where some people are running into not really getting into it in the first part because it's too much like a textbook. Or I think it's so high on the nerd factor. It doesn't mean you can't get into it, but you might want to have both the audio and the book. And that way the audio can pronounce the words for you so you don't have to try and figure out how you say all these random foreign words. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I definitely recommended it. And I did check out another book by that author that I'll be talking about this month, hopefully. Then I read or listened to Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. I have had this one in print. I don't remember if it was a library book or if it was one I had of my own and then I got rid of it or lost it. I wouldn't have gotten rid of it, but I ended up listening to it as an audiobook, and it was a 5-star for me. Nonfiction, natural history of humans. And I did a video about that one. Then I did a very small borrowed book that I didn't even borrow long enough to get it home. It was so short. It was only 112 pages. This is nice. I don't do short very often. It's called Creativity, A Short and Cheerful Guide by John Cleese, the comic actor who was in Monty Python and other stuff. So that was just fun and cute. And I went from that into another nonfiction, like a whole bunch of nonfiction all in a row. The Splendid and the Vile, a saga of Churchill, family, and defiance during the Blitz. Basically, World War II through the lens of Churchill. Not through his perspective, but looking at it through looking at Churchill. And I have that one in print in a large print edition, so it looks huge. It's not quite that massive, it's just large print. Although if you're not really into history, it might feel that massive. So it is history. It's probably accessible even if you're not really a huge history buff, though. You don't need to have a huge background in World War II to understand it. What I liked about the audiobook, which I did do audio for parts of this one and print for parts of it, because again, my internet sucks and sometimes streaming just doesn't happen. So the end of the audiobook, because it's audio, they could append the actual radio broadcast of Churchill giving his Christmas speech. So at that point, the text of the book has just talked about that speech. So because the audio format allows you to do radio broadcasts, instead of just being the text of that speech, it's actually Churchill speaking. It's actually the radio broadcast. So I liked that. I always like audiobooks where they take advantage of it being audio to bring in, multimedia stuff that you can't do in a print book. So I recommend that audiobook for that reason. If you're into history at all, that was particularly cool. So then we had The Islanders. This book did not count for Battle of the Girl Bands because I'd finished too much of it already going into February. it just had been dragging and not going any further for a long, long time. So I made myself finally finish it. It's a weird novel. It is a novel. There is a narrative thread. But finding it is a bit tricky. So, if you like experimental novels, you might like The Islanders. It takes a lot of kind of flipping back and, okay, is that the same person as this one here? And, yeah. I'm not sure what I think of it. I think so far it's still a 4-star. It may actually drop a little bit because the longer I think about it, the less I actually got out of the book. And it was a cool concept, but I don't know. I think that it could have been done so much better, I think is my takeaway on that one. And after that was a much better book. I really liked Stoner by John Williams. Now the title had me thinking, okay, is this going to be like drug culture? But no, it's about a professor, Dr. Stoner. Starts out, it's a Bildungsroman. He starts out, he's a child, he grows up, he becomes a professor. And he starts out in humble beginnings, rural, few prospects, and by various chance events ends up being able to be an English student and English literature, and then becomes a professor, and it's his life. So that one was good. It was well written, not the most gripping of stories, but the writing was really good. So that one was a 5-star. Alright. And then we get back to nonfiction. I have Killing Lincoln by Bill O'Reilly. The shocking assassination that changed America forever. What I didn't actually think about before reading this book, I think I'd heard of it, but I hadn't actually, registered it. When Lincoln was assassinated, he was not the only assassination. It was actually multiple assassinations, pretty much simultaneous. That was interesting. And this book really does a good job of capturing how that happened and just how bizarre that is. If you think about all the security around the presidents, we've had a black president, we've had Donald Trump as president. Both of those presidents survived their terms in office. And if the security had been as bad as it was for Lincoln, there is no way that the last few presidents we've had would have survived. So it was really an interesting one. If you like history at all, I definitely recommend this one. I guess there's quite a few books in this series now, Killing so-and-so. So I'm probably going to try the rest of them eventually, because this one was definitely good. So another 5-star nonfiction. Then we had some audiobooks. I listened to Unmasking Autism by Devin Price, Discovering the New Faces of Neurodiversity. Not the most groundbreaking book, but it was more modern than some of the other books I've come across in neurodiversity. My favorite in the autism neurodiversity spectrum of books is still probably Neurotribes, but it's getting a little bit older. So I wanted something that kind of brings me up to date with the current thinking. So that definitely happened with this book. I didn't totally vibe with the author in some chapters. I'm not always convinced that autistic people should unmask. I think there are valid reasons why an autistic person might choose to keep their masks, because it's safer or because it's just part of how they stay functional in the real world, where you can't just make everybody else change what they do so that you can fit in. So some of the chapters I found a little frustrating from that perspective, but it was pretty good, and definitely is a book worth reading or listening to if you or someone you know is on the spectrum, because it does bring together a bunch of more recent information about autism. The next book I finished was a novel, Breasts and Eggs, by Mieko Kawakami. This one is a feminist novel about being female in Japanese society. I liked it when there was a character that I was like, oh, I can resonate with this person because she's not interested in doing the stereotypical girl thing. She doesn't want babies. She's, being her own person, and then partway through the book she decides she wants to have a baby after all, just not the normal way. I've read other books like this, but this one, the character that decides she wants a baby, it didn't fit. Like, the character that she was up to that point was relatable to me in ways that made her wanting a baby really jarring. Like, I'm not so sure that it's consistent. I don't know. But that might just be me. So, in any case, it was a good book. If you're not somebody for whom that would be a sticking point, then it's good. In order of reading, let's see, the next book I finished was one that I got as a Goodreads giveaway, Of Love and Treason. This one I think needs to be marketed a little bit more accurately. And it was marketed with the Christian fiction as one of its genres, but it's supposed to be historical fiction, Christian fiction. It's not really geared to the standard just reader of historical fiction. It's really preachy. If you are not looking for a sermon in a book, this is not for you. I liked the historical setting. I wanted to like it more than I did. So, and if you are looking for a sermon in a book that just happens to be in a Roman historical setting that's more or less accurate, more or less, and there were some bits where it's not my specialty, but I still kind of wonder if that was actually accurate. If you're going for the sermon part, you're fine. If you're going for reading a book that puts you in Rome, there are better books. So that one, I think I gave 2 stars. Probably that one and Islanders will be my lowest for February. Then I did the other Goodreads giveaway that I got in January. So my other Goodreads giveaway that I won in January was Everyone on This Train is a Suspect. This is by Benjamin Stevenson. And it was really good. It took a while for me to get into it. It's a bit experimental, a bit metafiction. But once I got into it, it was fun. So that one was a 4-star. It still was really hard to get into for the first 100 pages or so. Once I got into it, it was all right. And then they had the audiobook of Thornhenge by T. Kingfisher. That one was a host pick for girl bands. That was short and kind of a modern fairy tale. It was cute. Then we have Doctor Who. A book with a doctor in it was the prompt that I picked this one for. It's got a doctor in it. It's got Doctor Who. Who actually is a registered doctor. They said she has had a medical degree and other doctoral degrees. So, yeah. Combat Magic's not my favorite Doctor Who book. It didn't make as much sense as it could. But it was fun. Yeah. Then we went back to audio. The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. This one is a Native American modern novel. So it's set in the reservation, or is it a reservation? I guess it's a reservation. I don't know as much about the Northeast and their reservation system, or Native American lands in the Northeast, which is something I need to learn more about, because if I have any Native American blood, it would be from that part of the Native American map. And yeah, it was really interesting. It was YA, so it took a while to get into it, partly because it's in first person present tense. I hate first person present tense. I don't want to be in their head. I just don't. And when it's in present tense, it's not like you're reading their diary. It's not like they're telling you the story later. I don't want to be in a teenager's head for that many pages. I just don't. So that was annoying. That would be the biggest negative to that book. And I still haven't really decided if it's a 4-star or 5-star. Probably it'll be a 5-star on Goodreads. But I don't know. 4.5 stars on Storygraph. Maybe 4.75. Then we have a library book. Okay. All the way up. This is a pretty book. Look at that pretty book. And it has beautiful artwork inside it as well. It's very pretty. This book is by an Irish author, and she's trying to save the world by changing how people think of their gardens. Making half of your garden wild, basically, to make more habitat for native things. And I love the concept. As described in this book, if you are from a desert climate or a semi-desert climate, which I'm in a semi-arid environment, that's becoming more desert every year, it seems. Most of her advice is only partially applicable. So, good book. If you're from a wet climate, then this is a great book. Although I'm still not sure how many cities in the U.S. would allow you to leave half your yard wild. You might still have to mow. But anyway, it was pretty good. Probably about a 3 or 4 stars. And we have a romance, literary fiction romance, but romance, between a 19-year-old kid and a 48-year-old woman. And they stay together 10 years and their relationship. And they meet playing tennis. So, not really my genre. I like Barnes a lot, Julian Barnes. So I liked his writing. But it was a 4-star. It really wasn't a story that spoke to me all that much. But it was good. And I do know friends that I would recommend it to. Then I listened to the audiobook of The Year of Less, How I Stopped Shopping, Gave Away My Belongings, and Discovered Life is Worth More Than Anything You Can Buy in the Store. This one was a 4-star. It was okay. I've gone through a few books in this subgenre, and this one's okay, but it's not one that really sticks. So it wasn't bad enough to be something I argued with either. Then Under the Banner of Heaven, a story of violent faith. This is John Krakauer's sort of investigative journalism book on polygamous Mormonism or Latter-day Saints. That people could come up with such an evil system and get away with it and still be getting away with it is a bit disturbing. Yeah. It's not the polyamory. It's not polyamory anyway. It's not about love. It's about control and ownership. And it just, yeah. Definitely a disturbing topic. It was a 5-star book, very well done, but a very disturbing topic. So I went from that to another disturbing topic and read and listened to Andersonville Diary by John L. Ransom. This is a diary by a guy who was kept captive in Andersonville, which was the Confederate prison, kind of a prison camp for Union soldiers that were captured during the Civil War. And it was gruesome, and lots of people died of disease and starvation and exposure. Yeah, it was harsh conditions and difficult, and very well done as a diary. Definitely readable and definitely recommended. Then we have Dutchman. We're getting to the end. We have a few more left and we're done. Dutchman by Mon Myers. I've had this one forever and only finally got to actually reading it. It was a little slow for the first 20 pages. Once I got through those, it was really good. Historical fiction, murder mystery, set in New Amsterdam, which is Manhattan area of New York City before it became no longer Dutch. So that was a really cool setting. Then we have Sources of Chinese Tradition. I finally finished volume 1. There we go. There we go. Sources of Chinese Tradition, volume 1. Oh my goodness. From January. I finished a whole 10 pages in January, so I made that a priority for February. Alright, last couple books. The last 4 books. Last 4 books. I have The Powerful Truth by Miranda James. Murder mystery with a cat. It was cute. Set on a campus. For folks that are doing Realmathon, this is a school setting. And it's cute and it's got a cat in it. Yeah. Then we have The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. That was an audiobook. It was very good. Definitely kind of a ghost story vibe and a murder mystery at the same time. I finished 11/22/63. I am rereading some sections of it for specific discussions. So I've still got some bookmarks stuck in it in places. And I will be revisiting probably about half of it. Because it's just such a massive book. And there's so many sections where it ties into other books that I want to go back and catch all those. But I did finish A King for February. And then Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel. So there we go. So, Bring Up the Bodies is book 2. And Wolf Hall was book 1. I did not like Wolf Hall. And I kind of liked Bring Up the Bodies. It was maybe a 4-star. So better than Wolf Hall. And part of it's that it wasn't as long. Because Wolf Hall was 653 pages. Bring Up the Bodies was 404 pages. So a lot more approachable. And then I do still have one more book in my stacks that I think might have been missed on Goodreads. Because I also finished A Gentleman in Moscow by Immortelles. So I have to figure out where that ended up on my Goodreads. But that is my books from February. And it took almost a whole hour just to talk through them all. And I'm definitely going hoarse from talking too much. So I'm going to leave that there. Lots of good books. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. And yeah, hopefully March is just as successful. I will show my genre blanket in my next video. I need to catch up. With this many books, there's no way that I'm caught up yet. So, yeah, hope you guys are having a wonderful reading month so far in March. I will check out as many videos as I can of everybody else's wrap-ups in the next few days. And I will catch you again soon. Bye, guys.